We love Classical Conversations.
Your organization is known worldwide, and we certainly appreciate every facet that you do.
I do believe in what you're doing because I've seen it in my family.
I'm so excited about all the things that, Robert, you guys do with Classical Conversations. It's been a huge blessing for our family.
Grateful for the work at Classical Conversations. You're a leader and you have been in this movement for a long time.
I do feel like I have a debt of gratitude to you, your family, all of CC for just the fruit that has come from CC.
Appreciate all that you guys do, both through this wonderful podcast and also through Classical Conversations, which I am convinced is the best education resource out there. Thank you very much for all that you do for the cause of Christ and for our families and for our children. Really, really appreciate it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an exciting episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today, I'm excited to welcome back Dr. Steve Turley. He is affectionately known as the Patriot Professor. He provides daily content on his YouTube channel since 2016 with over 1.26 million subscribers. Send some of those my way, please. 22 million podcast downloads, and you've written over 20 influential books. You've toured with President Donald J. Trump, and we're here to talk about America Awakened. It's your newest book, Collapse of Globalism and the Return to Faith, Family, and Freedom. Who would have thought, guess what, 12 years ago when Hillary Clinton had a 98% chance of winning, that we would be sitting here today talking about the rise of patriotism again in America. So, Dr. Turley, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's great to be back with you, Robert. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, we're seeing all these trade deals and this America First policy. And so you've talked about the collapse of globalism. Like, why was globalism embraced? And is it really collapsing, or are we just seeing a temporary pause in its expansion?
Oh no, it's collapsing. All you have to do is look at the globalists. They're flipping out over it. Yeah, I mean, globalism really came out of World War II when all said and done, and when you had Europe devastated, you had Japan devastated, you had the Soviet Union devastated. There was really only one superpower on the planet, and that for about a decade we were the only ones with a nuke, and that was, of course, the United States. And then we basically reconstructed the world order through institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and the WTO, World Trade Organization. And those provided the rules, the protocols that member nations were obligated to. And it initiated what's called the liberal international order, because the nation that was pretty much overseeing that order, that institutional order, was a liberal democratic nation, the United States. And we lived in a bipolar world for a number of decades, of course, with the Cold War. So there was a Soviet bloc of nations, and there was the Western liberal bloc of nations. But when the Soviet Union fell in December of 1991, Frank Fukuyama of Johns Hopkins University called it the end of history. Basically said we finally arrived at the one-size-fits-all political and economic system for all people's times and places, and that's Western liberalism. And so these institutions, the IMF, the WTO, World Bank, were now de facto, for lack of a better conceptual term, they were de facto basically the structures of a singular world government. And we believed that this one-size-fits-all political system and economic system would be triumphant for generations to come. At the same time, there was a fellow by the name of Sam Huntington of Harvard University who was arguing for a very different thesis, and that was the Clash of Civilizations thesis. And he argued that what happened in December of 1991 was not the ascendancy of Western liberalism, but it was the death of ideology itself. Ideology, this notion coming out of the Enlightenment, the 18th century, that scientific rationalism was the one true way of understanding reality, and that can provide the foundation for one-size-fits-all political and economic system, that confidence collapsed in the hearts and minds of everyone, not just people around the world, but Westerners as well. And so we were moving away from the era of ideology. Are you Western liberal? Are you Soviet communist? And we're moving to the age of identity, where populations were increasingly going back to nation culture, custom, and tradition as the basis of social order. And I think Sam Huntington has been proven right. That's where we're going. And again, this is 30 years before MAGA. And keep in mind, he's arguing this in the early 90s. And that's when we see people like Pat Buchanan rising up in 92, challenging George Herbert Walker Bush for the nomination, the Republican nomination. He came back in 96 is when we're seeing the rise of Ross Perot and just these populist movements that don't want to have anything to do with these transnational trade deals. Again, these multilateral trade deals, which are just one-size-fits-all trade deals that are governed by these international institutions. They wanted to re-embrace national sovereignty, economic sovereignty, cultural sovereignty. It took about 20 years and 20 to 30 years, but here we are with MAGA and ascendancy. And MAGA is just the American form of the civilizational populism that's just sweeping the world at this point.
Yeah, we've seen it in Europe. If they're not cheating and making them redo elections because they don't like the results, and we've seen it with Milei in Argentina.
Yeah.
Do you think on the globalism, was it doomed to fail? Was it just a good idea implemented incorrectly, or just the way that God designed societies to rise and prosper is just counter to the globalist idea of kind of this one nation, one world nation?
One world nation. Yeah, I think it's all of the above. You cover a lot there. There's layers there. Yeah, I mean, there is a Babel element to this. There's no question. And classically, we are unified spiritually, not immanently. We're unified transcendently, not immanently. Immanently, we have different languages, we have different customs, cultures, different ways of life. Japanese see the world very differently than Texans, and Nigerians see the world very differently than, pick your Koreans. We're cultural beings. We cannot not be at least at the very level of language. But we do have transcendent spiritual frames of reverence. So in the classical world, the virtue traditions, the wisdom traditions, there's tremendous overlap there, where you get into natural theology and all this sort of stuff. So ironically, the very spiritual transcendent frame that globalism tries to sideline and basically push into the periphery of society, that's really actually our basis for common ground with transculturally, as it were. Not our politics, not our economics. Politics and economics are always downstream for culture, and cultures are different. There's just no way around that. So you can have, like in Christianity, you can have multiple cultures who are united by a transcendent faith. Think of like Orthodoxy, Greek Orthodoxy, Russian Orthodoxy, Armenian Orthodoxy, Coptic Orthodoxy. They're all Orthodox, but in their own unique cultural expression. And what globalism tried to do is it basically tried to immanentize that transcendence. And that's, in effect, what Babel is. And then just practically speaking, globalism ended up eroding the very promises that we were guaranteed by the nation-state project: border security, economic security, and cultural security. So globalism despises borders because it represents limitations, as it were, and globalism likes to think that it can transcend frontiers. It likes cheap labor, so it loves immigration labor, and it loves exploiting migrants for that. But it also loves shipping, manufacturing, and industry to third world nations so as to maximize margins for corporate CEOs. And then at the same time, it ends up pushing back against criticisms of both the open borders and the shipping jobs overseas by claiming people are xenophobic and racist and bigoted. So wokeness actually plays a very important part in sort of a moral veneer that these, frankly, when all said and done, just these globalist, robber barons can hide behind. So they can bring in cheap labor. They can ship out manufacturing to cheap labor, maximize their margins, and then call you a racist when you call them out on it. So I think those three things end up eroding the border security, the economic security, and the cultural security that we were always promised as part of the nation state. We're promised secure borders so we're not invaded. We're promised some economic security so we can have a decent life. And we were promised cultural security where we actually celebrate our cultures, customs, and traditions rather than denigrate them. And unfortunately, globalism destroyed those three promises. And as a result, I think globalism itself is getting destroyed.
Now, you see the news media every day. This is unprecedented. This has never happened before. We're going to have economic collapse. Inflation's going to go through the roof. Whatever, crazy thing that they can think of. And none of it's coming true. So, when I've talked to people in the White House, they're saying that, all the good things that you and I would appreciate, that even better things are on their way, that it's just, taking time to get through it, but they're really pleased with everything going on. Why, like, is the kind of the people with PhDs and the people in the news media, are they just getting exposed? Like, have we just been taught economics wrong in this country for the last 50 years? Like, why is what we're being told won't work seem to be working so well so far?
Yeah, I think what we're finding is that our elite have become politically compromised when all's said and done. And so much of what they're advocating, the studies that they're putting forward and so forth, actually end up becoming really nothing more than special interest research. So think about the way Marlboro cigarettes put forward so-called scientific research in the 1980s, right, or 1970s. Yeah. And basically making the argument that cigarette smoking was good for you. Well, we find out that the so-called studies were actually they were compromised by virtue of the fact that they were working for these special interest groups, and so special interest scholarship, as it were, ends up obviously being very unreliable. When all said and done, our expert elite are shills for this globalist system. They've become very, very wealthy. Robert, I need not tell you the endowment that Harvard has. Sure. It will shock people. It's more than most nations' gross domestic product. It's billions upon billions of dollars. Columbia University, same thing. Yale University, same thing. This is big business at this point. And so ultimately, their so-called advice, studies, policies are really there to further their own personal enrichment rather than actually better society for most people. They really don't. What I find so fascinating, the more research I do, is they don't even really hide their disdain for particularly working class voters and citizens. And it even crosses the board. There was one time National Review, which is more kind of a neocon. It's known as it was started by William F. Buckley, known as a conservative center-right publication, but they even got into some big trouble a while back because they wrote an article that was incredibly disparaging of rural populations, Appalachia, and so forth. And of course, they could do that from their air-conditioned, Manhattan offices, because they're part of this cosmopolitan elite that transcends party, it transcends partisanship. It really is an oligarchy. That's the true oligarchy, as Bernie Sanders likes to try to beat it up. He's actually part of it, ironically. But it is an oligarchy that operates according to its own interests, its own power, its own affluence, and whatever can be used to further that, they'll do it. And what they've done is they've taken over cultural institutions, particularly academia, particularly, economics departments and so forth. And like Paul Krugman has been doing for decades, they put forward data that in the end secures their position, their cultural position in our society as our affluent elite. And but in the end, as we're finding, it's being radically challenged by a new elite, a new aristocracy, what I think Patrick Deneen would call more this aristopopulist elite that actually believes in the values, interests, and concerns of the people, and they want to use their power and affluence to enable those values to flourish. And I think that's clearly what Trump has done. Elon was doing it for a while until he kind of fell out of favor, the MAGA faithful. And so I do believe it really does kind of go back to this notion of sort of special interest scholarship when it's presenting itself as objective scholarship when in point of fact its conclusions have already been bought and paid for.
Have you heard the news? National Memory Master and National Commencement are moving to the Classical Conversations Family Cruise in 2026. This cruise isn't just a place to celebrate CC graduates and Memory Masters, but a cruise for all CC families to enjoy their time together. You can connect with CC leaders and families at all stages of their journeys and turn an educational experience into a fun, memorable adventure as you explore the Bahamas on the Royal Caribbean's Freedom of the Seas in 2026. Check out classicalconversations.com/cruise-2026 to learn more. That's classicalconversations.com/cruise-2026. We hope to see you there.
Yeah, I mean, we see that with like GLP-1, which is a weight loss drug that now they're trying to get insurance to cover it, but it's like $1,500 a month. And so everyone's going to be wondering why their insurance went up $1,500 a month once everyone can get this band-aided. And, there was a study that showed that caused a deterioration in muscle. And then like a week later, there was a study that came out magically that was saying, oh, it actually helps with these other disease preventions. And you see like, I don't know, the pediatric group saying that like, oh, no, kids shouldn't work out and go be outside. Instead, they should take this drug that's brand new to lose weight. And so,
right.
I mean, you just kind of see it if you're paying any attention about how these things, and of course, the global warming or global cooling or climate change or whatever terminology we're has been doing this for decades. So what do you see with like, it seems to be people are waking up. Maybe Elon Musk buying X or Twitter and turning into X may have been helpful in that. What is this new civilization going to look like? Like, what are we building here?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a really in the end a post-secular world rising. That's the field of study that anticipated a lot of this stuff going back probably about 3 or 4 decades ago. These are scholars like Jürgen Habermas and so forth. They saw that decades of secularization basically have amounted to nothing in the end. It's just petered itself out. Secularization really didn't have the transcendent frames of reference to be able to provide a coherent vision of reality for culture. So people are rediscovering that secular materialism can't provide meaning, can't provide purpose, can't provide sustainable community, can't even function culturally. Religion offers the eternal resources of civilizational renewal that secularism completely lacks. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a pretty impressive spiritual renewal happening all over the world. Europe's actually going through some record numbers of baptisms right now. We're talking even in secular England. We saw it particularly in 2024 in France. I think baptisms have 2x to 3x from anything they'd seen in any previous year, just in this last year alone. Hungary, Viktor Orban, explicitly building a Christian civilization, things like that. So I think that's happening. I think you're seeing an extraordinary spiritual revival, as it were, but at all levels of society. It's not just, personal piety. I mean, it's politics is changing, economics is changing, culture is changing. I think too that is it's happening as a result of the demographic discrepancy that has surfaced between conservative religionists and secular liberals. Bottom line, over the last few decades, religious families are just, when all said and done, they're having more kids than ever, especially when you factor in the end of, thank God, of infant mortality. They're having more kids than ever, while secular liberals have basically stopped having kids. And I'm not a Darwinist, but I mean, if ever there were an example of natural selection in effect, there it is right there. Traditional values, ironically, are extremely Darwinian, given that thesis. If you want to see a species flourish, it is going to have to be traditionalist. It's going to have a very traditionalist view of the family. You can engage in all kinds of experiments with the family, but there is only one that's going to continue to reproduce, and it happens to be the one that is at the heart of traditionalist values, particularly Christian traditionalist values. So I think you're seeing the resurgence of the family. I don't know, Robert, if you checked out the latest Marvel movie, The Fantastic Four. I just saw it over the weekend. Dude, it is the most pro-life, pro-family movie imaginable. It's incredible. And I mean, it's organic. It works so perfectly. The story arc of it is exactly, I mean, it just draws from hero journeys. There's a Christian, a very messianic theme, particularly at the end, where the son resurrects the mother. It's incredible stuff. But again, it's just organic, where wokeness doesn't work. I mean, not just purely pragmatically, wokeness doesn't work. And so you're seeing a return to religion. You're seeing a return to the natural family. You're seeing a return to border security, and therefore a return to nationhood, nationalism. You're seeing a return to a kind of mercantilism, where trade is seen as an extension of national security. So we're seeing a kind of return to economic nationalism, which can be all kinds. It could be very protectionist on the one hand, but it can also be, like you mentioned, Javier Milei in Argentina. It can be very libertarian, almost anarcho-capitalist on the other. It just depends what economic approach best protects and serves our nation and our culture. And I think wokeness has overplayed its hand dramatically. It's obviously collapsing everywhere we look, again, because it just doesn't pay. Everything woke ends up going broke. And so we're going back to the traditional values that are extensions of a return to religion. So faith, family, freedom, and the like. And we're really seeing sort of a rebirth of civilization here in its best sense of the term.
Steve, a question I've been thinking about is, all right, let's say our best case scenario happens. We're seeing young men go back to church, have faith, understand these conservative values are the ones that align best with reality. But at one point in our history, we had that as a culture, and we lost it. So what are some things that we can do to kind of inoculate ourselves from making the same mistakes that past generations have made, and staying more on the straight and narrow, and not re-embracing globalism in some new form or order?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, well, one thing that you're on the front lines of, that we definitely have to take very seriously, and thank God it looks like we are, is the educational renaissance that's happening, that I think is part of this retraditionalization. It's not a coincidence that classical education is the hottest thing in the nation right now when it comes to educational trends. We're going back in order to go forward. That archaeo-modern move is happening literally everywhere today, in all kinds of things. So again, think about what is MAGA? Make America Great Again. We have to, if we want to go forward, we have to go back because we got off the path somewhere. That's the notion. What has gone wrong means at some point we deviated from the path, and we have to go back to find out where we deviated, start there, and renew whatever what we had rejected, as it were, and betrayed. Let's renew that so that we can go forward. So I think clearly our educational renaissance is going to be at the heart of it. The current modern education model is there to foster globalism. All you have to do is look at any vision statement or mission statement of any school, and it is never, ever, we exist to create nationalist citizens who love their nation, who love their culture, who love their traditions. I defy you to find me a public school with that mission statement. It's always, we exist to foster the next generation of global citizens. So it exists for the purpose of perpetuating globalism. So it's got, the public school system has to be just shattered to its core. And I'm rather agnostic of what replaces it at structural levels, whether we continue with public education, whatever. I'm agnostic. It's got to be something akin to a vibrant classical vision of education, the paideia, as it were, that had culture at the center, the impartation of culture at the center. I think we have to take seriously our economics and see that big business can be just as dangerous as big government. I think we found that out precisely because they're almost inseparable. They work together. And again, I'm very excited to see that the patriot economy, or the parallel economy that had begun to build vibrantly after particularly 2021 and all the cancellations and all the debankings and so forth. You and I are hung out at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas. So even our DeFi and the new digital financing, all of this is creating I hesitate to even call it like a parallel economy because it's becoming so mainstream. It's just, it's creating a new phase. Scholars will call it the third industrial revolution. It's the cyber revolution, the digital revolution. And it is emancipating populations from the old liberal 19th, 20th century industrial order and the control mechanisms that are part of that order. We see particularly with the legacy media, where now, podcasts like yours, mine, and independent content creators and so forth, because of the internet, we get to bypass the old legacy media outlets in a manner comparable to how email and texting bypass the old post office. I mean, we still use the post office, but think about it. I mean, Robert, in terms of the interaction with messaging with people that once was 100% dependent on landlines and post offices, how dependent are you on that anymore? What is it? Maybe 1% of your communication, 2%, and then I think Greg Gutfeld of Fox News had a great skit, very funny fellow, great skit, that we needed to ban the post office. We just have to ban it. Why? Because all it is junk mail at this point. 99% of what I get in my mailbox is pure, unadulterated junk. There's no, and that includes landline calls. Yeah. Most of them are telemarketers and so on. It's just junk. It's been reduced to advertising and marketing, nothing more. So this new cyber world that's rising, I think, ironically, is also bringing us closer into traditional values as well. It's largely because of what scholars refer to as the noosphere And the noosphere is considered to be like the third stage in our planetary development. So first you have the geosphere, which is, your tectonic plates and your core and so forth, that gives you your planet. Then you have your biosphere, where it gives you all the life and human life and animal life and so forth. But now we're increasingly entering into what they call the noosphere, and it's based on the Greek word for mind, which is nous. So some call it noosphere, and which kind of sounds weird, but the noosphere is where the human mind, through the internet and through satellites that literally cover the Earth with a global cloud, collectively over 20,000 satellites. Only about half of them work right now, interestingly, and 70% of them all belong to Elon Musk. But what that's doing is it's creating a whole nother sphere of planetary reality, which is the human mind collectivized, as it were. And if you think it through from a theological perspective, mind precedes matter. In the beginning, God created. Mind precedes matter, right? So a divine mind preceded the creation of the actual material world. So the more technological we're getting, the more mental, the more mind-oriented we're going. So that means that the more we progress, ironically, the more we're returning. The more we're going back to the beginning, alpha and omega. It's stunning stuff. So there's these Darwinian kind of naturalistic philosophers out there who are calling themselves religious naturalists, because they think that this new era, this new sort of noetic cyber world that's rising all around us and that's changing everything, including money and so forth, they see it as they can't help but see it as very spiritual. So there's that archaeomodern trend that we're seeing, that the more technologically advanced we get, ironically, the more we want to return to tradition. And that's what makes classical education so extraordinary, and so on. So that's, I think, what's happening again is just very organic. We're going back as the way forward to the future.
Now, going into cyber and talking about that, what I want to get, this will be the last question. AI. So, and we talk about some of these non-Christians who almost see it as a spiritual thing. And of course, we know the devil's always trying to find the truth and move you just, 1 degree off from center. Like, AI has a great opportunity for us, but it's also, any sort of great tool can be used and weaponized against you. And I can definitely see how AI could be tried to use to make us more, bring back that globalism mindset. So, like, how are you thinking about, AI and, how that can benefit society, and what are some of the maybe pitfalls that we should be looking out for or considering?
It's great. It's a phenomenal question, and one we're going to be asking a lot more.
Absolutely.
In the years ahead, especially those of us who love classical education and so on. Well, one benefit, a clear benefit for us beyond just the economic benefits and so forth and productivity. So I think New St. Andrews, is really bringing back, the classical college is really bringing back the notion of oral exams. So they know you're going to use ChatGPT. They know that kids are going to, we are moving from an information age to an intelligence age. So the information age is where we had all this information accessible to us like never before, online at our fingertips. But you and I were still the responsible ones to gather all the information and synthesize it, and churn it out and give an argument and so forth. We're now living in an age where artificial intelligence can do that. Artificial intelligence can put it all together for you at a speed that you couldn't even come close to. So then we're in a position more of prompting and editing. So that's moving from information age to intelligence age. And what my colleagues over at New St. Andrew, what they're basically saying is, good. Okay, go for it. Do that. But when we test you, you're going to have to get up in front of an audience and we're going to question you without any notes. And we're going to see what you know and how well you can think and how well you can persuade and your rhetoric and the like. That can't be AI'd. That can't be fake. So ironically, AI is bringing back to the fore classical approaches to education and humanity that got covered up in the Industrial Revolution, as it were. So that's a good thing. It can help us in all kinds of ways, not only expand our capacities to synthesize knowledge and so forth at levels we simply could never have done prior to this, but then it's now putting into the foreground the importance of the really human things, as we would say, as Chesterton would say, the really human things that AI simply cannot even come close to doing. In terms of dangers, I mean, the big one is, I think at the level of the geopolitical, we are in an AI arms race right now. Trump knows that. He's at the forefront of it. He wants to make America the center of AI technology. And the reason that's so important is because China is trying to make China the center of it, and Russia's trying to make Russia the center of it. And actually, Vladimir Putin back in 2019 argued in a speech that the nation that controls AI will ultimately control the world. Because if you think about it, if you have the full AI advantage, as it were, I mean, you have economic advantages. You could come up with the ultimate business plan, as it were, for all your businesses. One of the things we talk about at the Bitcoin conference, I know you're there with Michael Saylor and so forth, is that this new digital revolution is basically saying nobody should be poor anymore. Poverty just should be a thing of the past, precisely because cyberspace is infinitely scalable, especially when it comes to money. So we're talking about what will Bitcoin ultimately be valued at? Its net value could easily exceed $100 trillion because it can just keep scaling. The cyberspace doesn't care. It doesn't have the kind of spatial temporal limitations that the second industrial revolution had. So what you get then is this notion that with AI, we can have the ultimate, or come up with the ultimate business models. We can come up with the ultimate military strategies. We could figure out how to counter nuclear deterrence, and on and on and on and on. So we're going through this AI space race, as it were, arms race. And then it does translate into space and what's called astropolitics, which is really interesting as well. And then I think when you bring in the whole spiritual renewal that's happening all over the world with Russian Orthodoxy and Chinese Confucianism coming back, and Indian Hinduism and Turkish Ottomanism and so forth, you're going to be getting into a theopolitics, which is fascinating as well. But that's going to be, I say fascinating, but also a bit terrifying to watch, is a little bit of this AI arms race that's going on. To what extent is that going to reshape our geopolitics and balances of power?
Well, I, for one, welcome our robot overlords.
That's right. That's right. Amen.
All right. Well, yeah, it's pretty interesting to see the more things change, the more human, the more important it is to be human, and the more opportunities we have to show that humanity. And, I think that's a great way to end this episode. So, yeah, go pick up America Awakened by Dr. Steve Turley, The Collapse of Globalism and the Return to Faith, Family, and Freedom. We gotta finish the job, and then we got to keep it. Where can people buy this? Where's the best place? And any last words about the book?
Yeah, they could just go Amazon. We hit number 1 on a number of categories. So thank you all for those who've already supported the book. But just go grab it on Amazon. It's nice and easy to get there. I think we should all be very, very optimistic about the future. There's, of course, could be challenges, no question. But we're seeing a political realignment where the left and right is kind of collapsed, and now it's the people versus the permanent political class, and that's resulting in sort of just these massive majorities that are, as you saw, Trump was able to benefit from. First Republican in 20 years to win the majority vote, popular vote. He was the first one since Reagan in '84 to sweep all 7 swing states. It's pretty, and we're seeing it all whenever he goes all over the world. He just he just acts like the boss literally everywhere. He has a political power that we haven't seen really in modern politics. But I think it's largely because he is surfing on this tide of civilizational populism that's sweeping the world, and MAGA is simply a uniquely American expression of this extraordinary return to faith, family, and freedom.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. Everyone go check out the book. And until next time, God bless and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortins. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.